All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been doing a series of video presentations that are based off of the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. I'm in the JavaScript section, and I'm under the video and audio APIs. And I had a couple of technical difficulties, and that's why the last tape is only about 3 minutes long, because I just started on this section. But I'm down here, and as it says, to get started with this example, and I don't think I've downloaded it. Let's see. So let's download this media player .zip. I may have downloaded it yesterday. I don't remember, to be honest with you. Well, it looks like I do have it. So I've got media player. So let's get rid of this one. And we'll take this one and we'll extract it. Now again, I may already have this done. I don't know. Well, I don't know where I put that. Did I put it here? No. Oh my goodness. Let's try that again. There we go. All right. So there it is. And that's what it currently looks like. In fact, I do think I did that yesterday, but that's fine. All right. At this point, if you load the HTML, you should see a perfectly normal HTML5 video player with the native controls rendered, which is exactly what we saw. We get sound, we get motion that you see right here.
Very dear, a kindred spirit.
All right, and you can see it appears to be playing just fine. All right, open the HTML index file. You'll see a number of features. The HTML is dominated by the video player and its controls. So that's that div that's right here, the whole thing. And here are the controls. All right. And basically it says that we're playing this file. If you can, play it as an MP4. If you cannot play it as an MP4, attempt to play it as a WebM file. You would put fallback content here. So if somebody had something for whatever reason, the video wasn't supported there, that the fallback content would show. Let's try our caniuse.com, and let's type in video right here. And you'll notice again, we're talking again, IE version 6 to 8, really old Firefox, really old Safari, Opera, and again, Opera Mini supports none of it. Okay. So let's bring that HTML file up. And there it is. So these are the same controls that they're talking about. Okay. So as it says, the whole player is wrapped in a div so that it can be styled as though it's one element as needed. The video element contains two source elements. We already talked about that. All right, the controls, it says, is probably the most interesting. It says there we have 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons. Play, pause, stop, rewind, and fast forward. Each button has its own class name. It has its own data icon for defining what it should be shown on each button, and an ARIA label attribute. Now that'll be discussed later, but ARIA basically says that it's something that should be supported by typically by a browser for the blind, so it'll read out the information to them. There's also a timer div, as mentioned right there. It's not really, I guess it's a timer span, really. And as it says, it will report the elapsed time that the video is playing. Just for fun, we are providing two reporting mechanisms, a span with the elapsed time and an extra div that will be used to create a horizontal indicator bar that gets longer as the time elapses. It says to see how a finished version looks, take a look here. Here's that extra bar that they're talking about. All right, now open the CSS file and have a look inside. Yeah, I saved it yesterday as AV, but it's totally fine. That's fine. So here is the associated CSS file. Not a small file, well over 100 lines. But let's take a look at it in here. All right, it says, first of all, notice the control styling, which you can see right here. We start off with the visibility hidden. In our JavaScript later on, we will set the controls to visible and remove the built-in controls from the video element. It says this is so that JavaScript doesn't load for some reason. Users can still use the video with the native controls. So in other words, if the person doesn't have JavaScript on, it'll still work. We give the controls an opacity of 0.5 by default, meaning they're less distracting if you're trying to watch the video. Only when you hover over the player do the controls appear at full opacity. Did not notice that, but let's take a look at that. That's not what I want. Let's see, that was over here. So again, unless you hover over this, now it's at full opacity, but when you move out, it's only at half opacity, so you can still see what's going on. You didn't notice that, and I did it right away. When I come over here, it's much harder to see the person walking. You know, there they fell down. You couldn't even tell that. All right, okay. We lay out the buttons inside of the control bar using a flexbox display to make things basically so you have more control over how they're laid out. All right, now look at the button icons. First of all, at the top, as it says, they use an @font phase block to import a custom web font. This, as it says, is an icon font. All the characters of the alphabet equate to common icons you might want to use in an application. Next, we use generated content to display an icon for each button. We use the before selector to display the content before each button element, the content property to set the content to be displayed in each case to be equal to whatever the data icon is. They apply a custom web font using the font family right there. In this font, it says P is actually a play icon, so therefore the play button has a P or play icon associated with it. All right. I've never used these, but it's interesting. As it says, icon fonts are very cool for many reasons. Cutting down on HTTP requests because you don't need to download these icons as image files. They're more scalable, etc. But last but not least, it says, let's look at the timer that's right here. Now, you should be at the point in your careers where at least the stuff that's in here makes at least some sense. All right. Line height to space things out, the font size, the font family, some text shadow, etc. Notice here too, we've got a flex of 5. Talk about that in just a minute. As it says, we set the outer timer to have flex 5, so it takes up most of the width of the controls bar. All right, we also give it a position relative so that we can position elements inside of it conveniently according to the associated boundaries. The inner div is absolutely positioned to sit directly on top of the outer div. The span is also absolutely positioned to sit at, so we're laying it out so that it looks very professional, for lack of better words. All right. We've got a fairly complete HTML and CSS interface already. Now all we need to do is to wire up the buttons to get the controls working. Create a new JavaScript file in the same directory and call it customplayer.js. So to keep this simple, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come in here. I am going to create a new file, and I'm going to immediately save it. And it should be going out there right where the other ones are. Good. And again, it's customplayer.js. So there it is, but there's nothing in it yet. At the top of this file, insert the following code that we'll look at in just a second, but let's put it in. All right, there it is. Here we are creating constants to hold references to all the objects we want to manipulate. They broke it down into 3 groups. The video element and the control bar, the play, pause, stop, and rewind, the outer wrapper, the digital timeout reader, and the inner div. Next it says insert the following at the bottom of your code. Now this is where the fun, so to speak, starts. You'll notice the first thing that we're doing here is we're saying remove the controls attribute. So as it says, these 2 lines remove the default browser control from the video and then make the custom controls that we created up above visible. All right. So next, let's implement probably the most important control. As it says there, the play, pause, media invoked when the function is clicked. All right, so I'm going to grab this, put it down at the bottom, and underneath that, we're going to put the code that you see right here. All right, so let's look at what we have here. All right, so this says the play, pause, media function, which is be right here, is going to be invoked when the play button is clicked. So when the play, there's the button. When you click it, we're adding an event listener which says call that routine. Remember, no parens there because that would literally call it. We don't want to do that. This says when that button is clicked, then call this function. All right. So as it says, we use an if statement to see if it's been paused. If it has been paused, we set the attribute on the button to U, and we invoke the method to play the media. All right. Otherwise, it says on the second click, the button will be toggled again. So it basically, it sounds as though at least it's a pause, play, toggle button. All right. Next, let's add some functionality to handle stopping the video. Add the following below the previous ones that you just put in. So that was down here. And again, by now, hopefully this is making at least some sense. This says when the stop button is clicked, we want to call stop media. When the media button, or when the media has ended, we want to call stop media. And those are going to be put down here, I would guess. So as it says, the click event is obvious. We want to stop the video by running stop media when the stop button is clicked. We do, however, also want to stop the video when it finishes playing. That's this one, marked by the ended event, fire it. So we also set up a listener to run the function on that too. So first they come in here and they've got the stop media. All right. And as mentioned right here, there is no stop method. The equivalent is to pause the video, set the current time property to 0, setting the current time to a value in seconds immediately jumps the media to that position. So it's like you did a hard rewind, so to speak, or you went and moved everything over to the beginning. All there is left to do then is to set the displayed icon to the play icon. Regardless of whether the video is paused or playing when it stops, we want to be ready to play it again afterwards. All right. All right, I'm still doing okay for time. So there are many ways we can implement rewind and fast forward functionality. Here we are showing a relatively complex way of doing it, which doesn't break when the different buttons are pressed in an unexpected order. First, we want to add the rewind and the forward event listeners. We put all our event listeners together. Of course, we'd want to put them before the routines that they're calling. So as it says, now onto the event handler functions. Add the code below your previous to define the media backward and the media forward. All right. So come down to the bottom here and add that. All right. It says you'll notice we first initialize two variables up on the top, interval forward and interval rewind. It says you'll find out what those are used for later on. Let's step through the media backward. Functionality from media forward is the same, but in reverse. So they're going to jump through this one, and they're saying it's basically the same as this one. All right. So let's try this. Let's bring that up here, and we will do it like that. All right. So first it says we clear any classes and intervals that are set on the fast forward functionality. We do this because if we press the rewind button after pressing the forward button, we want to cancel any fast forward and replace it with a rewind capability. If we try to do both at once, the player could break. Second, we use an if statement to check whether the active class has been set on the rewind button, indicating that it's already been pressed. The class list is a rather handy property that exists on every element. It contains a list of classes set on the element, as well as methods for adding, removing them, etc. We use the contains method to check whether the list contains the active class, which returns a Boolean result, true or false. Number 3, if active has been set, we remove it using the remove method. All right, we next clear the interval, and we use the play to cancel the rewind and start the video playing as it normally would. If it has not been set yet, so it's not active, then we want to add the active class to it. We pause the video. We set the rewind to be equal to set and set interval call. When invoked, as it says, it creates an active interval, meaning that it runs the function given to it every x milliseconds, where x is the value of the second parameter, or every 200 milliseconds. It says we use this function to wind the video backwards constantly. Finally, as it says, we define the wind backward and wind forwards. Don't think we have this in here yet. So as it says, add this below what we currently have. Okay. And again, they mention that they'll only go through the wind backwards. All right. It says, bear in mind when this is active, the function is running every 200 milliseconds. We start with an if statement, which checks whether the current time is less than 3 seconds. If rewinding by another 3 seconds would take us past the start of the video. All right. If we're not there, we remove the 3 seconds from the current time, all right, by setting that equal to a -3. So in fact, we're rewinding the video by 3 seconds once every 200 milliseconds. All right, and the last piece of code, as it says there, is to implement the time elapsed delays. We'll do this by running a function to update the time displays every time the time update is fired. So it says add this event listener below the others. And then finally, add this. And we're coming near the bottom, so even though I'm getting close on time here, ooh, real close, I'm going to put this all in this particular tape anyway. And as they mentioned, this is a fairly long routine. All right, so it says let's go through it step by step, and I'm going to try to do this rather quickly. So this is the set time. First, we work out the number of minutes and seconds. All right. We initialize the minute value and the second value. There's two if statements here that figure out whether or not the number of minutes and seconds are less than 10. If they are, we add the leading 0, so it looks like a digital clock. The actual time value to display is set in the minute value, and a colon, and then the second value. All right. The node.text content value of the timer is set to the time value, so it displays in the user interface. The length should set the div, all right, accordingly, and then we set the width of the inner div accordingly. All right. And as it says, there's one problem to fix. If the play or pause buttons are pressed while the rewind or fast forward is still active, it won't work. How can we fix this so that we cancel it? It says first add this to the bottom of the stop media function. Again, I'm just about finished here. So we added this to the bottom here. It says now add the same lines again at the very start of the play pause media function. All right. At this point, you could delete the equivalent lines in the wind backward and the wind forward, as it's already been done in the stop media function instead. So let's find the wind forward and wind backwards. So we want to remove those, and the remove and the clear. All right. Okay, now you could also improve the efficiency by creating separate functions. That's fine. I'll tell you what, let's save this. All right, and let's, just for the last thing here, let's run it. So this is mine. Okay, you'll notice I've got the opacity. And I'm just going to take for granted that it all works as it's supposed to. That's it for this lecture.